That's how I pronounce the name Deborah. Deborah. It's the
Yep, that works.
And Deborah is probably one of the most active founders within the Cosmos ecosystem. Um,
Shit that.
because you are in the Cosmos ecosystem, but somehow you like not upfront, with like everyone else, which is surprising. I think you are the first woman founder that I speak to. Not that it matters, but this space is very saturated with the men's. um, you founded the project that got some attention, which was Gravity Bridge. You are co-founder of Sommelier, together with Zaki and Jack Zampolin, I believe. Not sure if there is anyone else.
It's a lot
Um,
of stuff.
but but I think the project that is like at least most fascinating for me is Althea, which I don't know much about, and hopefully I will be able to learn a little bit. So you having this like very impressive founder background, if you mind introducing yourself, but like how did you even develop your interests in the blockchain? How did you start? And the interest in the public goods, because I do believe the Altea is actually public good, right? So please.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me here. And just to kind of preface and add a little bit of context too. So myself and, obviously Jack and Zaki from Sommelier, but there were quite a group of us that, started and participated in the Sommelier ecosystem. And we've sort of since, not been as active. So I want to be sure that my role is, was definitely there in the beginning, but it has now grown, which is
Mhm.
exciting. So for my story with crypto, we're going to have to go way back to early Bitcoin, and actually even before Bitcoin. So I got excited about distributed systems with something called Folding at Home. So this was a really cool volunteer project, if you're not familiar with it, where people could use their compute power to fold proteins, and basically collaborate on scientific research all together throughout the world, instead of a scientist having to use like a centralized supercomputer, which are hard resources to get. And so that really started to open my eyes to the possibility that you could cooperate on this amazing global scale. And so when Satoshi wrote the white paper, it just made sense. And I was instantly sort of in love with the idea, and thought about different ways we could utilize it. I unfortunately did not buy Bitcoin. I mined it, so and not as actively as I would have liked. But that's how I got started, and we went through mini rugs and Rex and ecosystem things like Mt. Gox and BTC-E and Butterfly Labs, and through all of the interesting ecosystem developments too. Where I met my co-founders, Jahan Trembeck and Justin Kilpatrick in 2017, who were working on the really cool idea of decentralized ISPs and blockchain.
um you were when you were mining, you had to dump, I understand, Bitcoin for the sustainability of this, but I was right, so you probably didn't really accumulate that much.
No, unfortunately, I just
Or
didn't mine that much. So we might GPU mining, and there's no large bags
what
that I
what
have. But
year was that? What year was that?
oh gosh, 2013, 2014, something like that. It was pretty early in the
That was
ecosystem.
that was around the first times I heard of it. I think the first bubble was 2013 or 2012 ending, but I was just like pretty much like student, and I only heard about
Yep.
this new internet money hitting $1,000 without understanding anything of it. So it's not. I would never consider this as the missing, because if you don't understand, you don't miss on anything. But like you just mentioned, this folding at home, and like it's first time I'm hearing about this. Like, what is your background? Like, do you like the Do you have any background in like academics, like biology or something? Because like seems folding at home is related to protein folding, or like predicting the protein folding. So like it's cool that you developed the interest in that.
Yeah, I think that my interests have always been on the the slightly maybe academically nerdy side of things, and I've been a ham radio operator since the beginning of time, and built networks for fun, and so I think just a lot of my interests intersect with things
Mhm.
that are interesting and nerdy and cool. Um, so, but not necessarily on the biological side. Typically, it's more in engineering and building things.
So I guess you did heard. Sorry, like before we get into Althea, because like the folding is like really cool, and I think blockchain could have the role in it. I think it doesn't have, because like 2 years ago, right, when we had the COVID pandemic is peaking, I guess back then. We get the medications that um, mRNA medications, right, that deliver the instructions to the proteins, and around the same time
Oh, yeah.
we get the AI that is able to predict the protein folding, and everyone is like, this is the game changer, right? Like, so is there a space for it, you think, in the blockchain, or it's only like the thing of AI, and we won't be able to have the open source platform where the simulations of protein folding can be run and everyone can contribute to the drug discovery, maybe?
I think that you
Sorry,
really hit
that's
the
too
nail.
much.
No, I think I'm sure you probably weren't planning on talking about this on this podcast, but I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's the democratization and access to this huge resource that blockchain, I mean, the promise that blockchain brings us. So, certainly scientists at the top research institutions oftentimes have access to the best, AI, the best computers, and all of that. But if I had a breakthrough scientific theory, I'd have a very hard time testing it. Even right now, I think about, we're doing 5G testing and we're trying to, have emulation of what that process would look like. It's the collaborative, like the global compute and the everyone sort of participating that allows everyone to also have access, and it really brings that democratization that we didn't have before, and I think that's what's so
Mhm,
exciting about it.
mhm. Yeah, like, because I think like, so we like, I'm mentioning like essentially like protein folding, but like everything starting from the biology to the internet to the energy is very related, in terms of you need democratizations, you need the simulations to be run by the different communities to get possible best possible outcomes, to see what works or not. So we're like to stick in. Do you know, I mentioned the guy before, Martin Shkreli, pharma bro from New York. Have you
From
heard
where?
of him?
From
Martin
where?
Shkreli from New York. Martin Shkreli, he was in prison, and um he got famous for increasing the diaphragm, the drug price for toxoplasmosis in 2016 by
Oh,
5,000%.
yes, yes. I okay, yeah. I have heard of this unfortunate thing.
He went to prison for different stuff, for a fraud, but he's out, and it seems he actually built something cool. Like, there is this, I will send that later, like, there's this drug like, which is exactly this stuff that, for biology, because I'm pretty sure he's banned from the industry. Don't want to like misconception, but like, this is like platform for democratizing access costs, and for the drug discovery, like, so something that you do
Oh,
for the
interesting.
internet. I will send that to you, if I will share that link. But that's also related, and I was checking his project, because I think that's also kind of public good, because not
Yeah,
everyone can participate in the traditional world of that, but with that everyone
for sure.
can participate. But um going to the internet, because first I want to speak of Althea. But we probably need to start with what is public good. Many people don't get that. And is Althea also commons? And what is commons? Because many people in the blockchain don't understand those concepts. If you could tell.
Yeah, and I think they're a bit nuanced. I think in how each sort of cultural people think about those concepts. I think that Althea is a technological stack that empowers a public good. So it's the open access framework
Mm-hmm.
and egalitarian sort of microtransactional structure that creates a structure for you know kind of autonomous network building, and we call them like broadband Legos, right? So they allow people to build networks in ways that are community focused, and then they're intrinsically change the power dynamics between a like kind of a centralized monopoly that builds infrastructure, and then because that monopoly is building a piece of glass fiber optic to your door or is owning that infrastructure, then they're capturing you, and they're capturing your data, and they're monetizing you as a user, versus an open access infrastructure that many people can invest in and own. And then because of that, it sort of has that built-in democratization of ownership. And ownership, I usually think about it kind of meaning choice, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
leverage this, where the volume and the bandwidth is a commodity kind of going through this. Think of it like an aqueduct or a sewer or something like that, right? Where you have those pipes that are there owned by many different people versus having them having to sort of capture both the infrastructure itself and the user data flowing through it. So that might be a bit abstract way to look at it. But I think the technological stack puts the structure in place that locks in the
Mm-hmm.
open access nature of it, and hopefully that
Mm-hmm.
kind of follows.
Yeah, I want to break it down a little bit. So, like, as of now, how we get internet is this. I will try to use very very simple words. These big companies that own the infrastructure, right? So for many blockchain people, they might not understand what exactly you are building, but you are providing the hardware, right? Is the is it correct? The Althea is Althea building their own hardware, or it's more blockchain focused that you try to incentivize some group of users and see the data? How is the
So to add some kind of maybe clarification. So when we think about the internet, it's two things
Mhm,
actually. So it's actually a series of infrastructure, like literally pieces of glass, fiber optic, or a tower with a radio on it that's broadcasting. And then there's the data sort of flowing through it, the packets, right, that then get
mhm,
interpreted and appear out to the internet at these internet exchanges. So and then there's the service layer, right? That you think about, the
mhm,
people that you have to call, the operating and things like that. So normally if you have in the US, we have a company called Comcast, right? They're pretty monopolized. They're going to own so they own all of the pieces of fiber optic and the radios. And then they also own all that data moving through it. And they're controlling that. And then they also do all of the service, right? So they have this like full monopoly over the whole experience. And that's basically how all of the routing protocols and how the billing works and how all the system that's in place. So
mhm,
Althea made a new system and said, hey, this system isn't working. It's not working for users. And it doesn't really work for telcos either. Comcast isn't evil. They just have to expend all this money to go in and build all of that capital to put in all of that infrastructure and all of that operating expenses. And so, of course, they have to then just extract as much as they can from you.
mhm,
So the model is very broken. So what Althea is actually firmware. It's a software-defined networking stack. And, really you can use a fiber optic cable, you can use radios, you can use whatever you want to, use to build networks with, but it changes how bandwidth and how internet is bought and sold. So instead of one company having to own all the pieces of the hardware, many different people can and get paid automatically, little microtransactions on the blockchain. And then also the service layer can get paid automatically. So when I think about Althea, I think about a platform. It's an operating system for a new way of buying and selling on the internet.
Mm-hmm. This is much clearer now, and sorry if I will like try to think of this, but there is a lot of difficulties with this model, right? Because there is a group of people that have the hardware, and with that they able to control their data, right, and exchange the data and provide the internet from the small from the unique locations, instead of like one big conglomerate that does that. But at the start of doing this, there is a lot of difficulties with like competition, and to bootstrap such public good and give the idea to the people that you can potentially own your data, decide how it's used, and maybe even get the best possible price for your internet. To bootstrap this and this idea, you have to incentivize that somehow, right? Like it requires a lot of funding. Is it incorrect what I'm thinking here? Like without funding, you will not be able to build the network here.
Well, I think
are you Mhm.
so. One thing we may want to clarify is that networks, generally, when we think about the internet, it's actually more like a branches of a tree. You have the main trunk, or like tier one internet, and then you have the middle mile, the kind of the branches, and then you have these sort of last mile networks, and then you have like mobile networks that connect to your phone. So a lot of times what we're talking about is just kind of that last mile piece,
Mhm.
where it hasn't been capital efficient for a large telco to use that kind of old model. And we have people that have started networks in their communities for $5,000 or $10,000. So the lift is probably a lot less than you're thinking. But what we find is that because the kind of broadband Legos and this system is so flexible, we're also able to reach new markets. For example, lower income people, this is a prepaid model. You're just kind of paying for what you use. There's an always on free tier, which is really pretty cool. So people actually just go to their router dashboard, they swipe their debit card, and they maybe put 5, 10, or $20, $50 in there, and it exchanges that for that stable coin. And so the UX, the experience feels very familiar. I just load it up, $50 on my router. But then you're just kind of paying for what you use. You have an open marketplace for this. And so most people, we just shared on our Althea about one customer that was paying $90 a month for the internet is now paying $30. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Like these systems just work. The old legacy ways of doing things was more expensive, was slower
Yeah.
data. We didn't build where places, they couldn't build into a lot of like rural or low income places. And so I think number one, we're a lot of times we're just kind of talking about that little last mile piece. So it can be pretty capital, light. And then
Mhm.
two, that what we're finding is that, we're actually able to put, capital into new markets and open up new ways of doing things that are interesting
Mhm.
for legacy telcos to do.
May I know where the infrastructure for Althea exists now? Because I imagine it's probably only in United States right now, in the certain areas. The people who can benefit and pay this $30 for the network, and also is this network fast for $30? That's also
Yeah.
another question.
So what's okay? We're in 7 U.S. states. We have a work that we're doing in a partnership in Puerto Rico, and we have a network in Ghana. We've previously built in Nigeria and Colombia as well. And so really we have partners everywhere that take the technology costs nothing, and it's open source, there for people to use as they want to. And I'm really excited about the new part that we've built called Key LTE, where people can actually use this technology to build LTE networks. So, connect to smart agriculture or a private phone network, or, there's just a variety of things that you can build with this now.
Hmm.
But so there's some really kind of cool things when we think about bandwidth as a commodity, and we think about networks completely differently. Then these networks are usually a couple hundred megabits per second, depending on it's as fast as your medium of transport is going to go. So if we're doing fiber,
Hmm.
we can do multi-gigabit per second. If you're doing a lower cost wireless, a couple hundred megs. But what happens is, when people prepaid, then they're able to use that full capacity of their network. There's no such thing as a speed tier. Like, why would you pay to artificially throttle your connection?
Yeah.
That's an archaic way of thinking. But with Althea, you get the best that whatever your connection is going to give you. And then when you're out of money, it throttles you down to a free tier. And so most of our networks are 5 or 10 megabits per second. There's a really
But
cool model.
you still can
Go ahead.
connect for free, which is the public good stuff, right? Like, hey, like, you might not have money, but you should have the basic access to the internet, because, like, hey, that's where the world is right now. We need that to communicate. But, like, are you also, because it seems your model is like perfect for rural areas. Like, if I'm like somewhere in the rural America and I don't have access to the internet, the Althea like could build the networks there, right? Would Althea also be compete in the big urban areas, or it's
I want
rather not the goal?
Let me share with you this really exciting project we're doing in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think it'll really sort of highlight how this agile system works in urban areas. So most of our rural networks are 15, 35, 50 splits, meaning 15% of the network people don't pay at all. They just
Mhm.
sort of use the free tier. That's what they can afford. And then about 35% of the people pay some of the time. When they get paid, they put on $20, and then when they run out of money, they run out of money. And then about 50% of the people pay every month, just like you normally would. And that really creates a sustainable model that pays for the technician and the service layer. And then the infrastructure providers are paid as well. So, what we're doing in Atlanta is actually capital provided from, public goods funding. So there's a problem that a lot of the lower income and underrepresented people in Atlanta are having no access to internet at all. Despite maybe having cable to their home, they're still not able to
Mhm.
either afford it, or there's other problems. A lot of times it's credit. In the US, they make people do credit checks in order to get the internet. Um,
Mhm.
so if you get behind on that $200 Comcast bill, a lot of people just never get internet again, and it's just really heartbreaking. Um, so what we're doing here is a 50 megabit per second free tier. Um, and so we're thinking it's probably going to look a little bit more like a 30% of folks are always going to be on the free tier, 20% are going to probably pay, part of the time, and then 50% are going to pay in a sustainable way. But this is going to connect 10,000 households in Atlanta, and build a real, holistic network that will be also, IoT, smart cities. It'll connect up the charging station. It'll connect up, people that can't afford to pay that put back into the network. And so I'm really excited about that model, and what we're, building a kind of a new paradigm there.
Mhm.
Oh,
Um.
and then one thing is also
Yeah.
really cool. I think we can't forget this. That means they're going to have a Cosmos interchain accounts connected wallet in every single one of those households, meaning democratic access to DeFi, to lending, to stable coins, to all the exciting things that we're excited about in blockchain. So with Gravity Bridge, that also means they have everything that they have access to on the Ethereum side.
That's very cool. And Cosmos people and crypto bros should be aware that those projects, those public goods, are bringing users. because if they are at disadvantage and they have no choice but they use the wallet, like that's how you get adoption. It's not via speculations, not via airdrops, not via like you have to show to people that hey, you can use this because that's beneficial to you. And you are not the first person to say that. I was speaking with Empower Chain the other day. And
Yeah.
they focused on the plastic waste and incentivize, or they have incentivized program in like many poorer countries where actually like they can't do it because those monies are meaningful for those poorer communities, which could be meaningless for richer communities. And he say, look, these people are essentially new users, like this is, you
Yeah.
know, and that's how it works. That's so cool. Like, but I still think like, so the hardware you build is rather heavy, right? And it required this $10,000-$15,000, right? So to provide structure, can we get to the models that I could run this from my balcony? Can we
Yes,
build something like that?
you can. No, so this is interesting because I think back in 2018 when we first started, we
Hmm.
started with more of a helium, like for folks that maybe are kind of familiar with that, right? People just kind of put stuff on a shelf and um, kind of build a really decentralized stack. But what we quickly learned is that there were problems with that being a performant network that people needed to use, right? So when you think about using the internet, you need a really high uptime. You need to be able to count on it. You need to be able to count on the ping and the latency and the throughput. And it's going to be important for safety. And there's many reasons why that network needs to be stable. So this is why we brought in the network operator model, where it's a coordinated network, that there's someone there that's performing service, and they get about some money per day from the router. Usually it's about $1 a day, or maybe 50 cents a day or something like that for
Hmm.
every kind of router that there is in their network. And then there's someone for someone to call when things go wrong. Because if you think about your internet at home, can you imagine if you it was out for 2 days and there was no one to call to come help you fix it? It would be really, people just, we can't really adapt to that right now. So we built a more coordinated model where you can have local governance. And I mean, some of these are member-owned cooperatives, and there's different levels of democratic governance that you can build into this model. And like you said before too, when we were thinking about some of it, it's more like roads. Like if you think about large telco towers or fiber optics, some of it will require more funding. And so this is why we are now evolving to this really cool idea of liquid infrastructure. And this is a bit of alpha that maybe I haven't talked about too much. Once in a while I'll talk about it on the community calls, but what's really kind of cool about what we can do now is that since we know, this tower, this fiber optic cable is getting a certain amount of microtransactions, let's say $1,000 a month or something, that actually can we can tokenize that asset itself as an NFT or as a fungible token, and then people can trade that in open marketplaces or lend or borrow
Hmm.
against it. And so we think that you really can create some very interesting investment, and that can be community focused, where the kind of municipality kind of goes in and like puts a bond, or there's a lot of really interesting things that can happen when things like fiber optic becomes a tokenized asset.
Hmm. You mentioned the helium model, and so like we know that the helium model is burning a lot of cash, right? Because they try to incentivize those small providers, but it's um it's non-profitable for anyone, including those small providers, right? So this is why you chose the other model.
Well, the main problem with
And the
helium,
network is not reliable. Is it correct?
yeah, I think that they built a network that people did not want to use. So that was evidenced by the fact that no one used it. I think their revenue last month was $1,500 for all 900,000 hotspots. So that there's clearly some, not market. There's no market fit here. Really, it's a market. It's a
Mhm.
network that was built, and I think what we did learn is that people are incentivized to put something on their shelf and participate. Just kind of like the folding at home that we did earlier. I think people were really hopeful about that. But there wasn't that, Althea's always just had such a really tight feedback loop with actual people using the network. We built this in Oregon here alongside, regular people. I taught grandmas how to use Coinbase. And we iterated on a model that worked for people where they're at now, instead of sort of making people kind of come up to a certain amount of level. Like, can you imagine teaching TCP/IP to someone to like use Chrome? I mean, that would never work. So we wanted to make something that would work for people where they're at in a network that people would want to use.
Mhm.
So I think that the two kind of problems here are essentially what you're doing is paying for people to lease out their home internet, which is not always great, and their rooftops, which is also not always great, and it's not always useful. So Althea is a revenue-based model. People pay into the network, and then as packets are forwarded through, there's a pay-for-forward piece of it. Now, users also get to choose their choice of cost or latency, and the network will route through that. So you can say, I want to have better cost right now, or I want to have better latency, and you really have a lot of choice and ownership. But nodes are not going to get paid in the network unless they are performing packet forwarding.
Mhm. Can you tell me like uh what's the like revenue? Like I understand the revenues are going to those entities that do provide the internet, and I wonder like what are the revenues, if that's the public information somehow, or maybe secret information that was passed to you. And also like what is the user base of people using the network that is provided via Althea network, right? So how many internet users from those sources are out there, and what are the revenue models? And for Althea, I wonder, because as it's public good, it's hard to imagine how Althea can benefit from that, right? Like, or it's Althea itself just burning money and giving power to the hands of the people, and that's the end game.
Well, there's a lot of questions there.
Sorry.
The first one is that our revenues are, between 10-15x what helium's are, just in terms of kind of holistically the whole network. So it's obviously having a lot of traction, even though we're just kind of getting started. We also, about a year ago, now we haven't checked in a long time, but it was about 71% of the microtransactions of XDAI. So there's definitely a lot of activity, and it works. And we really have everyone that uses our networks. We have emergency services that man the ambulances in rural places, and businesses and fire stations, and Subway sandwich shops, and
Mhm.
homeowners and farms, and a wildlife refuge. And anyone you think that needs connectivity uses Althea, and they love it. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of we haven't seen a lot of churn as the networks grow. Now, there's been a few interesting examples that we've been trying of like taking legacy networks and actually turning them to Althea, and that's been an interesting process. And we've been learning about that as we go along.
Mhm.
And then, what was the final question?
About the revenues models for Althea. If Althea
Oh,
itself is having revenues, or it's just burning cash for incentivizing people, and it's end game to zero till like you expand the network. Because actually, like even comparing to Helium got like 300 millions, I think, funding, and they just burn a lot of that. While Althea was like in 11, 10, somewhere around that, right?
oh my gosh, no, not
And
even that much. So there's still
yeah,
opportunity.
and you having like more revenues than these large companies, so like are you losing that, or there is already revenue coming somewhere from what you provide for Althea itself? Because despite its public good, is there also like the Althea company that can benefit from that public good, right? Like this is something I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, just to clarify, Althea actually refers to the blockchain and the platform. So,
Hmm.
when we talk about Althea, we're talking about all of the Althea token holders. So, the blockchain isn't quite launched yet, but
Hmm.
soon, trademark. I think, hopefully we can maybe talk again once blockchain is launched.
100%.
uh, so, the Althea token holders, they'll be able to potentially earn fees for this being essentially kind of a settlement layer for that. And also, the Althea blockchain is going to be COSM WASM compatible. So other people can build things like maybe a distributed electrical grid or different types of precision ag or reward tokens or something. There's so much. Are you
I
excited?
need to I need to connect you to someone. Like this is so like unwatchable. The electric grid, what you just said, is just such a fascinating thing. But I just don't want to. And the cosmos and electric grid. This is like no one will get that. But this is so power to the people. I just don't
Yeah,
like.
but we think
Mhm.
it would be pretty. I mean, we would love to support someone building that on top of Althea because we've built the software-defined networking, the routing piece of it, and then we've also built the microtransactions, and then we have the connection to the decentralized gravity bridge, so you can have
Mhm.
that all in stable coins. So it makes a lot of sense that you could just apply that to distributed electrical grid technology. So yes, I think there'd be really other, and then the when we think about tokenizing that fiber optic, that liquid infrastructure, tokenizing RF spectrum, that all happens on top of the Althea blockchain. So there's many
Mhm.
ways for Althea token holders to participate in that ecosystem and earn revenue too. So when we think about Althea, that's its revenue model, is providing, being the blockchain for telecom. Now, our
Mhm.
company, I'm actually the CEO of Hawk Networks, which derived the IP for Althea and Gravity Bridge. We build networks. I mean, these networks that use the Althea stack are profitable. So we do operate nodes and build our own networks, which is great. I actually got when we started off the company back in 2017, 2018, I was in crawl spaces installing antennas and building networks. We also do system integration for a lot of our private LTE work. So one of our clients is
Mhm.
an EV company. They do electric vehicles. And this is really interesting story too. I think you might find this poignant. So you're talking about the distributed electrical grid. They were saying, hey, it's going to be multiple billions of dollars for our connectivity costs for mobile connection for the vehicles and the charging stations and all these kinds of things. But what if we built a private network?
Yeah.
And what if we use Althea's microtransactions? And what if that, so there's a lot of like really exciting things. And then there's just kind of work to be, to build these systems and do system integration for, companies and things like that. So we do a little bit of that and that supports that. And, we, we do different blockchain things and, yes, so we have kind of lots of kind of multiple revenue streams as a company, and we think there could be lots of other Hawk networks is out there building really cool things. In fact, there's a really great network in Montana that is building a support system around Althea network. So there's lots of
Mhm.
opportunities for people to. We want to be the Linux of telecom, where
Mhm.
people can take the stack and use it, these kind of modular pieces, and monetize those as it works for them. And so that's the kind of, and you see that with Gravity Bridge, the open source protocol, been forked and used in Sommelier and Ume and Injective, and it's now this open access blockchain that anybody can kind of connect to and build different front ends. You see Canto and Persistence and NIM and Crescent and all these different Dexes using it. And it really it's really evolved as a decentralized platform. And I think that's really
Mhm.
the promise of open access protocols.
Mhm. This is something that people don't realize about commons protocols because they think they are non-profit organizations. Like they don't understand the public good protocol that it's it allows. So I don't believe we have like really, hey, this free markets, which is fair. public goods allow you to be a free market and allow you to use the data of the chain of, like, let's say I want to, I can participate in Althea network, and I can use this to build my company and profit from the data that is provided via this public good, which is your company doing. You build on top, right? And you are like not very, like you said, you are a profitable company, which is insane in the startup, like in such an early company, right? So
Well, just to
people,
clarify, we are cash flow, we have cash flow, we have revenue, we're not quite profitable yet. So we're
okay, not
actually,
sorry, but it's good you
we're
have
getting there.
revenues. Okay, that's
Yeah, we have
forget that.
revenues and yeah, and it definitely offsets our burn. But we are growing more. We have more opportunities, more of those networks like Atlanta that we're building.
Mhm.
And I'm going to apologize really quickly. I'm going to turn off my video and get a cord for my phone. Um, I'll just keep talking. But yeah, so we're really close to sort of being profitable, and now we're really scaling, and probably will raise additional capital to help scale.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, when it comes to this sort of networks, is the is it legal? Because is it legal in US that you install your own network and you sell the internet to people? Like, I mean, because I'm pretty confident. I come from Poland. I'm pretty confident it would be illegal in Poland. You know, the same as with anything else. The kind of like laws are structured around the fact that you can't just run your own infrastructure, and the same comes to electric grids, right? So,
Well,
is it legal in US or like, and
yes.
how? Mhm.
And I think it's probably legal in Poland too. The way that we organize the network is it's somewhat federated. So
Mhm.
the um the traffic actually decrypts at what we call the exit node, right? That's kind of what you think about when you use a VPN, right? It
Mhm.
runs through a different internet exchange, and your traffic gets decrypted there. So that entity who runs that server is actually considered the ISP. Um,
Mhm.
and that's the entity that has to comply with any kind of, we have what we call CALIA in the US. So if you have to comply with
Mhm.
law enforcement, or however you uh, want to do that, and then that's the entity that also has to file the forms, and that's where that kind of legality comes into. So
Mhm.
Hawk Networks is a legal ISP. We have an ARIN number. We run BGP, and we run sort of a set of exit nodes that people can utilize if they don't want to do the licensing to do the ISP themselves.
Mhm.
Or if we're in Ghana, our partner there, Revabit, who has started an amazing network, they are licensed as an ISP to broadcast, and they've gone through the process and paid the money for that. So
Mhm.
typically there's some sort of process to become an ISP in different countries, and it can look a little bit different. And we can support our networks in that process. And oftentimes you'll find a service or a service provider that's willing to help support Althea networks. But we do tend to look at them more like infrastructure, and take a long-term approach rather than just sort of, throwing up kind of janky hardware that may or may not get taken down. So we take the former approach, what will last for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Also, like, I know a few years ago, I'm not sure if I'm not mixing up the facts, in like in many states, in many countries, the internet providers, they have this strategy that they can burn a lot of money. And I think that happened in India, that some telecom offered people free internet when they buy the SIM card, let's say, and they have like lifetime free internet. How this model can work, because they can upsell them on other products, right? Like, you give them free internet, you have customer for life. Um, how Althea could compete with that?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because you do see that. I remember actually when we built a network in Medellin, Colombia, drove into the community, and there's this big sign that said free Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. and then the rest of the internet costs money. So I think what starts to happen when these models start to take hold is it becomes more like television, right? Where, yep, or they start selling your data. I remember CenturyLink actually gave a keynote speech in which they talked about how they could shape human behavior and how actually giving away free internet allowed them to have more control on human lives, which is very chilling. But they served a great salad at that at that lunch, and they were, very proudly talking about how that was their new business model. And so my fear is that if we don't create models that work for people, that are sustainable, that have open access, that it will evolve into this what I remember what I was saying kind of early about that user capture. They want to extract value from you, either that's by shaping your behavior to do certain things or buy certain things, or by sort of segmenting it off, like, maybe Wikipedia is going to be an upsell, maybe all of these things, or like the folding at home. We think about all these amazing access that we have with the internet. If that was all gated behind, different paywalls, it would fundamentally change what we think the internet is.
I think you are right with that. I think what was in India, it was like free YouTube. And some of these platforms. So not sure if you remember. There is the guy called PewDiePie on YouTube. He was the
Oh, wow.
first
Yeah,
YouTuber
I remember that.
who got 100 million followers. But someone who was catching him was one channel from India, and it was growing so much in popularity. And the reason was the people who were buying internet, the SIM card or whatever, they had free YouTube. And what they were consuming, they were like, as they were buying, I think they were subscribed to this channel or something like this. So it was directing them like to consuming the certain content, right? So like it's something that that you actually say, and I think that's the strategy of like many companies, right? It's free, but you well, if it's free, you are actually the product, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you token model, right? Because I try to think there is now Cosmoverse, and it seems we are not part of this. People having
Which
fun
we are lamenting, yes.
in Colombia. Why are you not there, by the way?
That's a great question. I would love to be there. We do have Dave and Michael from Loa Labs that are supporting Gravity and Althea with comms and messaging, and they're there who are talking about Gravity for us. We are actually, I'm actually speaking at Blockchain and Government in DC next week. Or this week, excuse me, here in another day or so. So I was, so it was sort of torn between doing that, which I think is also very important. Right now, we are in an interesting regulatory landscape when it comes to the US regulation and crypto. And I think it's important that there's a perspective of how blockchain and infrastructure can work well. And that it is empowering and enabling, rather than, there's a lot of what's in the forefront of lawmakers' minds of things that have gone wrong. But we want to really demonstrate. And in fact, Althea has been mentioned before in ways that blockchain can be going right. I think that we also, just because of the work that we do in communications infrastructure, there's things that we think about working together with like the National Spectrum Consortium and folks in DC around Open RAN or dynamic spectrum or security of the mobile networks. Like one of the things we're working on is, kind of permissionless access, permissionless and secure authentication to mobile networks. So if you think about how you connect to a phone network right now, the cell phone company knows your name, your address, probably what food you like to eat, what you ate for breakfast, everything about you. But why? Why does your telephone company need to know what you ate for breakfast or where you live? They don't. So what you can do is do almost like a public-private key pair authentication. So that, and it can be right there at the edge. You don't have to go all the way back to the core of the network and authenticate. So really, there's two things that your telephone company needs to know about you. It's the it's they need to know if you have money in your wallet, right? Which is where you kind of Althea company, and then what you're willing to pay for that. So you have that price aware routing protocol, and you would be driving along and you say, look, I want to pay 10 cents a gigabyte for 30 millisecond latency, but I'll pay 20 cents a gigabyte if you can give me 5 millisecond latency. And then I have $10 in my wallet. And that's all your telephone company should need to know about you, is that how much you're willing to pay and that you have money in your wallet. And then the Althea sort of pay-for-forward system forwards packets back to the rest of the internet. And so that's sort of the sort of long-winded answer of saying it was tough to not be in Colombia, but we're in DC. I think we're doing good work.
This is not only problem with the like the internet, also like with the data visible to others. It's again, we could go back to like electric grids, right? So like, but why I brought Colombia, there is this talk, maybe you've seen it on Atom 2.0. And I'm trying to think and how Althea solved that issue because we tokenize the networks, right? So and to me, tokens, I'm trying to figure out what are the tokens. Are they the shares, or are they something that meant to incentivize the network and grow the network adoption? And with that, how we should design the tokens, because I feel that many networks, even the public goods, when they design the tokens, they make sure that the early adopters, early buyers, early investors are benefiting the most, but you will liquidate the future labor as the network grows because of the scarcity of your token. Maybe not sure if that actually makes sense. So essentially, you kind of, it's public good, but you build very similar system to the Web2, where the founders and early members are the largest benefitors of the network. So I wonder, like, is there anything unique about the token model of Althea network that it can be also scalable within 5 or 10 years from now, and let new people to be huge benefitors of that network?
Yeah, I think that's a great topic of conversation, and I think it's been one that we've been thinking about in terms of also proof of stake networks. We've seen that they do tend to lean towards centralizing over time, or being centralized at first and struggling to decentralize out. And a lot of that is because you have sort of a distinct set between the validators and the users. So the Validators and Cosmos are amazing, by the way, and they're a wonderful group of folks, and they do an amazing job. I'm just daily amazed and feel very honored to work with them. But I think, when we're thinking about Althea and democratizing that access and ownership, one of the really cool things we can do about this sort of like modular firmware is actually build a validator into your home router, so that you can own and custody Althea tokens yourself if you want to. And then and then you could get voting alerts on your app on your phone. And so that UX and that ease of being able to participate in the ecosystem is a lot easier, rather than, right, I think right now, part of the reason why we have almost like the same problems you have in corporations, where the early equity holders like really have such a large share, is this is sort of very difficult. The barrier to participate and add value to these blockchains is really high. So what we're looking at, I certainly think that what you'll see with the Althea platform is that we take a kind of almost progressive decentralization approach, because it is so important that telecom infrastructure does stay up. It's important to people that their internet doesn't go down. But and we realize some of these pieces will take time, but I think the vision here is that everyone could run a validator, they could participate, they could open, have tokens. And what we want to create is that iPhone-like UX, where that could be, they could very easily, connect to region. Maybe there's something that adds carbon credits and they're encouraged to do that, or connect to Akash and earn revenue for participating in that way. And so they have a lot more democratized access to the tokens itself, and also the sort of interconnection between liquid infrastructure and the tokens themselves.
So with that, the tokens should be more flexible, you think, like the issuance of the tokens, or because there's a lot of talk, like, which is still like about capping the tokens, right? So you put the cap of the tokens, there will be never more than like 21 million. So is Althea having this like cap token approach, or rather like it's like, no, you don't want to discuss this, the tokens are here like incentive for growing network?
Well, I think that as a blockchain founder, you start something, but then the blockchain is not me. So what
Right.
Althea decides to do as a community is beyond beyond what I dictate. So, I think we'll see it evolve, over time. And I think what we want to do is sort of put in place, again, it's kind of like Althea, the firmware. We want to put that structure in place. I think as the liquid infrastructure and the interconnection between minting an NFT that represents RF spectrum or represents the fiber optic, and understanding if it's better to have scarcity or to have issuance of the token be more in a utility format, I think will evolve as more of the network gets built and the marketplaces for those liquid assets evolves.
Can I ask you what you prefer? Like, what's your thinking? Commodity like tokens or utility tokens? Where do you stand?
I think the holy grail is always something that's useful, a utility type of token. I think that something that I've learned over the last years of sort of running this too is that it's difficult between the liquidity and making sure that you're aligning people that are buying the token for speculative reasons with the users. So we would probably want to make sure that activities like, minting the NFTs, and there's alignment there. I think Stargaze has done a really great job of thinking about, how the token economics work when you mint an NFT. So it's the same thing that we could kind of put in place for an Althea fiber optic NFT mint. And I think there's some interesting things that can happen there.
As you will use Cosmos, were you thinking maybe to integrate with Stargaze? Sorry for a random question, but like as you mentioned that.
Yeah. We've definitely had some conversations about that too, and I think possibly a lot of the work we've done with them together on the Gravity has been around ICS 721, which is the interoperable spec from NFTs. So I think that for sure, like what if fiber optic, or maybe there is an NFT that's representing something on the Althea blockchain that then goes to the Stargaze marketplace, through ICS 721. And what's neat about what we can do with the Gravity Bridge too is people can pay with using stable coins. They could earn royalties in stables. Like there's a lot of really cool like interchain accounts, interconnect, that you could do that makes it super simple for people just to do what they want with NFTs. So yeah, I definitely think there's a possibility. We've had a few interesting conversations to explore that too.
Yeah. Have you met Shane?
Yes, I have actually in Europe not too long ago, but we've definitely been working together pretty closely on the ICS 721. So it's not a new conversation.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm asking because I do really like Shane. I consider Shane one of the like nicest people, just after you, in blockchain. Like I don't know, like he was always genuine, and I feel like he does really he cares more about like building the good web and good network than just the Ponzinomics, which is like so rare to see. I think Shane is in blockchain for right reasons. And I hope I'm not wrong about that. um, I wonder, because as you mentioned also Akash, so we have compute, we have energy, and we have internet. Oh, Deborah, you are gone. Deborah is gone. She dropped, uh, and she's back. I was talking and I realized you are. Can you say something if I can hear you?
Test, test, test.
Perfect.
Test, test.
Um, Nice to see you again.
Sorry about
What
that.
I
I
was
don't have Althea at the moment, so this is the problem here.
Look, it's the same. Like, I live in this beautiful like apartment, right? Like, there's four towers. They meant to provide like this connection. We have this kind of like staff for each room. This is like internet, right? So it connects each room, meant to be very fast internet, 5G. It's dropping. I go to living room, I have the same thing in the living room, I can't use my internet. And I didn't have problem when I was living in crappiest place, and it meant to be
Yeah.
like 5G. I go to living room and I can't use Twitter. Like, it's horrible. Like, seriously. And Hong Kong meant to have like very fast it has fast internet, but it just doesn't work in this building. Like, there is something wrong. Sorry for complaining that, but we
No,
have
and
few
I think
things. Mhm.
I think it's a good point, because that's it. It's like we experience our internet on our devices. So it doesn't really matter if all of the, internet is all the way back to, the device on your wall. But if it doesn't go from your wall to your computer or your phone, it doesn't matter. It
Mhm.
might as well be broken all the way through. And so I think that sort of proves my point about, like, it's very necessary that networks be performant. They need to
Mhm.
work for people that use them.
Mhm. Do you think one day, because you mentioned Akash, so we have compute, we have the internet, and we have energy, could we use those things as the currency one day? Like, I mean, like, they make kind of more sense. And sorry about my wife in the background. uh you know that she came to nap and now she's leaving. And oh, sorry, like, it's so unprofessional on my side, but we live in the small place and she has no respect for my work. um do you think we could use energy, internet, and compute instead of the tokens? Could we cut tokenize, because these are really utilities that people need? Makes so much sense to exchange energy, right? Or they don't have this great function?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is that you definitely you have something that you can utilize with microtransactions. So people can add capacity back to the grid. They can add compute back into the system. You can add an internet, right? So there's that sort of function of having this transparency layer of these microtransactions that makes a lot of sense, because you can really create open marketplaces for them. But then there's also a predictability here too. So you can also assess a demand. You can have a steady stream of revenue, and that creates also interesting things for like municipal type bonds, where or you can lend on it. I mean, a lot of the reason why municipal infrastructure works is because you have a really long payback, a 30 or 40 year bond type system. And that really, I mean, if you have 30 years to pay something back, there's a lot of really interesting infrastructure that you can build. And so I think it really kind of changes the model, and I think it shifts the power dynamics
Mhm.
from that extractive, exploitive, monopolistic model to a democratized, open, and very flexible investment model. So, yeah, and I think that's what we'll see when we start doing liquid infrastructure, and you start to have, maybe you end up having a port, or a train system that's
Mhm.
tokenized. And why couldn't you make a stable coin out of that? Why couldn't you
Mhm.
basket up all of the different infrastructure assets that earn revenue and um, collateralize that in a stable coin? There's a ton of things we can do. I mean, certainly the legality of some of this is going to be challenging, and we'll, have to look at how the regulatory environment progresses. But I think, just in generally in principle, there's a lot of really composable systems we can create. So yeah, I absolutely think so.
So like we were mentioning like power grids before, and I'm not like you also mentioned region, and you mentioned carbon credits, which is something I don't like, and maybe you can prove me wrong. I will try to get the Gregory to speak to me, because I feel carbon credits are the privileged class asset that doesn't really improve well-beings of the disadvantaged classes. Like it doesn't improve the lives. Like it's similar like with nuclear energy, right? So we move forward, we bring the more efficient systems, and this more efficient system, cheaper, greener, was nuclear energy, and then we decided to step back from it, right? And we decided to go into less efficient systems. And in similar way, despite it's something different, I see carbon credits, I see putting additional expense just on the fact that you produce more carbon. And I wonder if there is solution to this, because if you look at the energy data, I believe over 50% of energy that is produced is actually wasted. It's wasted in the power generators, it's wasted via anomalies in the power grids.
It's
So I
terrible.
wonder, why don't we spend more time looking for the solution of non-energy waste, which essentially brings cost of energies down, which means better life for anyone who is less privileged financially. Greener energy, because less production like of the energy, and better storage, like it makes green energy and essentially removes the need for carbon credits, right? um so can we create these more efficient energy systems, you think?
I absolutely think we can create more efficient energy systems. I think one of the most shocking things that I've learned over the last 4 years of building Althea is how poor everyone's electrical grid is. And then, things like the litigation against PGE in California after the fires created additional problems. And so, really we're in a state, like you said, even with nuclear energy, where it's really gone quite, downhill. It's
Mhm.
not a working system, and the infrastructure is old and ailing, and we're not really looking to fix it. So I agree with that. Although I think that carbon is more nuanced than that, and Greg, of course, is much more maybe close to this than I am. But the way that I see this presented is actually in the Midwestern farms in the U.S. So we spent a lot of time kind of working on internet out there. And
Mhm.
what's happening is the energy crisis has unfortunately raised their cost of fertilizers, to grow corn and soy, which the Midwest is only corn and soy.
Mhm.
Maybe there's like one other crop, but it's corn and soy.
Mhm.
Um, and so they're like paying 3 or 4 times. And so many of the farmers can't afford to put the fertilizer on the fields, which will lead to wastelands of dust again, perhaps.
Right.
So we're rapidly kind of coming into where the agriculture systems are breaking down. And so
Mhm.
I could see potentially, if we are incentivizing farmers to be able to create um, healthier ways of farming. And maybe it isn't carbon credits, but maybe that's kind of something we can do now that allows farmers to sort of lay fallow their land, or to put in cover crops and things like that sequester more carbon, and make a healthier type of agricultural system. But
Mhm.
similar to how the electrical grid is really kind of not sustainable long term, neither
Mhm.
is how we're growing crops probably either. So
Mhm. Yeah, with the power grids, like especially with the changing climate, the people don't realize how unstable our power grids, and we do experience, like few weeks ago they had this information on the mobiles on California that they might expect the power outage, right? And it happens all the time recently. So we need more stable power grids. I know there is like some experimentation from the companies, but I think there is a chance to do this very similar thing what Althea is doing, and maybe connect these two things, that you can run simulations on the blockchain, and use the simulations to see what works, like grid simulations to see what works, what's the most optimal, and then you can use that information once again as the public good to create your own business about more stable power grids, right? Which is essentially troublesome because it's controlled. The energy is even worse than internet. It's fully controlled by the states, right? So, like
Except for
you living in,
Texas.
sorry,
Texas.
expect. Oh.
Texas in the U.S. has unregulated power, which has created a few issues when things went way out of bounds. So that was the interesting thing with totally unregulated power or very lightly
Mhm.
regulated power is that it worked, like you said, run the simulations, and as long as things are like kind of normal, right, then you
Mhm.
can set kind of norms for power. But what 1 year they had a very terrible, unprecedented like cold snap. And so
Mhm.
then the price was like skyrocketed for some people because it was sort of out of the bounds of normal. So that was kind of interesting. But that Texas is one of the few places that I know of that you have more of an open and unregulated space to try some more experimental models, which I definitely am in favor of doing more of that. Um,
I always say I love America. So many people say bad things about America. This is still the greatest place on earth that allows people for those experiments. Seriously, I understand these systems created so many inequalities, but these systems also allow for experimentations, But in other places, you have Poland, Germany, whatever, like Estonia, like you absolutely are not in control of your energy at all. And as you said, the issues with weather, what happened, spiked up the prices. But those simulations long term can optimize the grids for every environment, and you could crash the prices down so much and make the energy a real public good, the same way as you see the internet as the public good, right?
Absolutely. And resiliency too is a big part of how I
Hmm.
think about it. I mean, everyone's going to have electrical vehicles. I mean, those are the future. People will
Hmm.
charging stations, all of those things will have batteries and, ability to contribute, not just utilize. And so it's really that agile system. So if part of the grid goes down, and we don't have that now. I mean, and that's really this fragile. And it's the same with the internet. I think most people just don't realize it, but we're unfortunately, as climate change becomes more of an issue and more of the disasters are hitting more frequently, it's the reality. For us, we
Hmm.
can't build fast enough. Look at Puerto Rico, who just went through Hurricane Fiona and suffered a lot of damage. I was down there recently and realized that they hadn't rebuilt in a way that was very resilient. And unfortunately, we just kind of keep doing this.
Hmm.
But it is changing. We are, democratizing it by having power banks and having electrical vehicles and things like that. I mean, that are basically big batteries.
Yeah, I do hope we head for a better future, and it kind of seems like many people, like I do feel like US is actually encouraging this experimentation. Like many people think US is against blockchain. I think actually they are most pro blockchain, trying to regulate it in some way. But am I seeing it wrong? Because what China did, they banned it. But I
Yeah.
see blockchain in similar way as the internet, something that Japan had a lot of electronics, and then US was like internet, and it was this wild west, and essentially that's how United States won the internet war. And I feel maybe this is another wave of the blockchain, that's you need to allow for experimentations because it you will win if you encourage that.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that we see when there is more diversity, different cultures. And I think one of the reasons why the US is really pretty amazing is it's the melting pot. You do have a lot of different folks from different backgrounds,
Mhm.
and that really, I think, brings in that amazing innovation and creativity, which is
Mhm.
so exciting to see. But yeah, I think my take on, just the government's sense in general is that there's sort of a very different perspective on things that are just blockchain based. I think there's a lot of thought, um, and experimentation and a lot of really positive thought about what blockchain can do. And nothing I've heard negative there. I think there
Mhm.
is definitely a fairly understandable reaction to some of the crypto, some of the just purely sort of like looking at how we can incentivize certain things,
Mhm.
has had some problems in the past. And so, I'm hopeful that, especially with the Cosmos ecosystem, that we can show rigorous testing and engineering and high quality content, and that we are about new and innovative systems, and not about the kind of pure incentive type schemes. Because
Mhm.
I think that the government, despite us being somewhat resistant to them, is looking for ways to actually utilize the technology.
Mhm. This is really great, and I hope people will see that. I hope people will see that the blockchain is not about the tokens and you trying to price go up, but it's the thing that really will be responsible for better future are probably the things like Althea, and I hope we can like maybe make people excited about this part where, hey, there is no speculation, that much, but rather like we are building something because we want to advance the humanity into
Exactly.
more efficient society, more sustainable society. Because let's make it clear, if like Altea will get wider expansion, you with the access to the internet, it will increase efficiency. And whether
Exactly.
it's not sure if it's bad or wrong, but it will accelerate economic activity. Not sure where it leads the world, because it seems that sometimes it leads to the bad spots. But that's the
That's what
that's the way, I think.
democracy is messy, and freedom evolves as it
Hmm.
does. According to each owns will. That's the great thing about freedom.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that many of us here are idealists. I think, unfortunately, we do see what I like to call wrapped web 2,
Hmm.
sort of just the same legacy types of systems with corporations sort of looking to capture the user and exploit. And we just put some little, crypto wrapper on top of it and call it
Hmm.
good. And so, but I think, deep down, many of us are like, we both are here, that we believe
Hmm.
in a better future, a more egalitarian future. And that,
Hmm.
they got excited back when, we all have our first read the white paper story, right? Like, where were you when you first read, Satoshi's white paper and thought
Hmm.
about, well, okay, this is very cool. This is cool for currency, but what could it also do for technology, and think
Hmm.
about a more distributed and egalitarian world?
Hmm. Well, with the first excitement, as the time passes, I'm always becoming more critical. Like with the time passes, I'm becoming more critical of Bitcoin, and it's like, hey.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there. Well, I think that there's an initial, right, and there's a starting point, but we never
Hmm.
want to stay where we were. You always want to evolve, because stagnation
Hmm.
is death, and growth is
Yeah,
life.
yeah, that's
So,
that's the very good point. So, Deborah, um, you gave me a lot of your time. Um,
thank you. You
if you
too.
want to say, something at the end, I know it's very late at your place. It's like past midnight already, or not yet?
Oh, not quite, not quite. So, and
Well,
we're talking about blockchain and changing the world, and so I'm now reinvigorated. I appreciate your
yeah,
time this evening.
Yeah, if you want to share something like that we missed on this video, or maybe like some question that you're not being asked but you wish you would be asked, is there anything like this?
That's a tough one. I think one thing I would like to talk about is that um, it may seem like Althea has built a lot of technology, and it doesn't all seem to fit, and it seems like a lot. It's really complex. But if you zoom out into the overall picture of a decentralized, open access, permissionless networking system, you see that the price aware routing protocol, the pay for forward, the Wi-Fi connectivity, the operating system tools, the gravity bridge, the key LTE, the ag fiber, and now the liquid infrastructure are all these building blocks to this platform, this Linux like operating system platform that people can take and be empowered to build all kinds of amazing and decentralized systems. So I hope people feel inspired to to take the technology that we built and use their imagination to what they could build with it too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will enjoy your evening, and you continue building more amazing stuff. We still have time to talk like next time about Gravity Bridge. We will see how Gravity Bridge will evolve. Sommelier, you said not that involved, but most excited, like I must say, like Althea is like something that really excites me, most of them all. So once again, thank you for your time. I hope people, because it's quite inconvenient time, so I hope many people will come to see this chat later. A little chaotic, but I think a lot of great ideas and great informations out there. So thanks
I
again.
really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the work that you do, sharing with everyone in Cosmos.
No worries, and enjoy your evening, the rest of your evening. Don't work too hard.
All right, you too. Thank you so much.
No worries. Bye bye. Bye bye.